45 and 47. You know, in the entire expansive history of the United States, only one other person has ever served non-consecutive terms to claim two totally different numbers in the line of presidents. Today, we're looking at the man who locked down these two specific spots, creating a massive historical anomaly that has just completely reshaped modern American politics.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, our objective is to trace a really unprecedented life, career, and political journey. Relying strictly on the curated historical records we have, we're going to impartially unpack the data behind a figure who, according to the documents, has fundamentally altered the landscape of American politics.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be walking through 6 key phases. We're starting with his roots and real estate beginnings, moving to the building of the Trump brand, his first presidency, his defeat and legal battles, the second presidency, and finally, his legacy and Trumpism. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1, Roots and Real Estate. Donald John Trump was born in 1946 into some serious wealth. His father, Fred Trump, was a highly successful real estate developer over in Queens, New York. And because of that environment, Donald was essentially a millionaire by the time he was just 8 years old. Growing up in a 23-room mansion, his path was heavily focused on discipline and business. He actually went to the New York Military Academy, where he was taught the absolute imperative of winning, before he eventually transferred to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. After getting his economics degree there in 1968, he officially took over the family business in 1971, and he immediately set his sights on the big leagues, the lucrative heart of Manhattan.
And this right here perfectly illustrates a core philosophy he adopted really early on. Back in the 1970s, Trump met a lawyer and fixer named Roy Cohn, who ended up being his mentor for over a decade. Cohn instilled this exact worldview in him. Life is transactional. Scholars and historians actually cite this relationship and this specific mantra as the foundational blueprint for how Donald Trump would handle pretty much all of his future business and political dealings.
Part 2, Building the Trump brand. So throughout the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s, Trump's focus expanded massively into skyscrapers, hotels, and casinos. He was heavily licensing the Trump name, all alongside a notable propensity for constant litigation. But, behind those towering facades, his business journey was actually highly volatile. His companies filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 6 different times between 1991 and 2009. A really critical moment hit in 1995 when he defaulted on over $3 billion in bank loans. That led lenders to seize the Plaza Hotel and most of his other properties in a huge restructuring deal just to help him avoid personal bankruptcy.
But despite all those massive financial restructurings happening behind closed doors, his public image took a dramatically different turn, starting in 2004. For over a decade, he hosted the hit reality television show The Apprentice. This was a hugely pivotal era because it broadcasted and cemented his image right into living rooms across the country as a wildly successful billionaire and a decisive outsider. And really, this TV persona set the perfect stage for his eventual pivot to politics.
Part 3, The First Presidency. Presenting himself as that decisive political outsider, he pulled off an unexpected victory in 2016 over the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, becoming the 45th president of the United States. Once he was in office, his administration enacted some sweeping and often polarizing policies. On the domestic front, he expanded the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico, signed the massive Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, rolled back numerous regulations, and profoundly shaped the judiciary by appointing 3 Supreme Court justices. Globally, he instituted a travel ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries, pulled out of major climate and trade agreements, and kicked off a significant trade war with China. And as his term was wrapping up, he faced the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, frequently downplaying its severity while simultaneously signing the historic CARES Act into law.
His first term was also defined by some truly historic congressional clashes. According to the records, Donald Trump was impeached twice by the House of Representatives. First in 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and then again in 2021 for incitement of insurrection. It's important to note, though, both of these impeachments ultimately resulted in acquittals by the Senate.
Part 4, Defeat and Legal Battles.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredibly dense sequence of events compressed into just 4 years. Following his 2020 loss to Joe Biden, Trump refused to concede, which culminated in the January 6th Capitol attack and kicked off an unprecedented barrage of legal challenges. In 2023, he was found liable in civil cases for sexual abuse, defamation, and business fraud. Then, in May of 2024, he became the first U.S. president ever convicted of a felony, found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records. Yet, completely defying conventional political gravity, just months after this conviction, he made an ultimate political comeback and won the 2024 presidential election.
Part 5. The Second Presidency.
Defeating Vice President Kamala Harris, he assumed office as the 47th president. And with his pending federal indictments quickly dismissed, his administration's actions were immediate and aggressive. Historical records document mass layoffs of federal workers and the imposition of tariffs on nearly all countries at levels we haven't seen since the Great Depression. He also signed legislation known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. On the foreign stage, the source timeline shows this era included a 2026 military raid ordered into Venezuela to capture its president and authorized joint strikes that initiated the 2026 Iran war.
Naturally, this rapid execution of expansive executive power was met with immense friction. Records showed that his administration's second-term actions, which included the targeting of political opponents and mass deportations, drew massive legal pushback. This resulted in over 550 lawsuits challenging the fundamental legality of his sweeping policies.
Part 6. Legacy and Trumpism.
So, as we look at the totality of this era, how do historians actually encapsulate it? Well, it begins with a single term, Trumpism. The source defines this as Donald Trump's specific leadership style and political agenda. It's a phenomenon that has entirely reshaped the Republican Party's identity since he first descended that escalator to announce his candidacy back in 2015. It represents a fundamental shift in political norms and party loyalty.
When measuring the impact of this era, researchers and historians point out several defining characteristics. According to the source material, they note that his campaigns and presidencies featured false or misleading statements to a degree totally unprecedented in American politics, alongside the promotion of conspiracy theories. Furthermore, researchers have frequently described his actions as authoritarian, saying they contributed to Democratic backsliding. And, following his first term, scholarly rankings actually placed him among the worst presidents in American history.
When you look at the bankruptcies, the reality TV fame, the impeachments, the felony convictions, and then the return to the highest office in the land to enact some of the most aggressive policies in modern history, how will history ultimately measure a legacy defined by both unprecedented disruption and an unprecedented political comeback? It is an absolutely fascinating question to ponder as history continues to unfold right in front of us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.